Right friends, welcome back to editorials discussion. This is the first session of second week, and let us look at the present pattern of current affairs. Newspaper editorials discussion. This is 5 days a week, 3 capsules on various topics and 2 capsules why and how and facts and figures every week. So, all together there will be 5 newspaper editorials discussion, each will be 30 to 40 minutes duration, and these 5 capsules, that means every week you will have 10 capsules or modules as far as current affairs is concerned. And we have looked at the suggestions given by various students. Some students stated that increase the capsules to 8, but the reply from learning space is the present modified pattern with this 10 modules or capsules will be extremely beneficial. It will be highly beneficial to the students, not only 5 capsules every weekend, the newspaper discussion will immensely benefit one and all. So, that is the main reason behind shifting over to this pattern from January onwards. And the second suggestion given by the students, it is a valid suggestion. Give more emphasis on S&T health education issues. Definitely they will be incorporated gradually in capsules, and basically issues pertaining to socio-economic aspects as well as science and technology. If you look at science and technology, nowadays gene editing is one aspect, like that blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, cyber security. So, these are all the aspects. Everything is in our mind, but gradually we will introduce them. And the third important aspect is some students raised that frame answers to the questions which you pose in the editorial discussion. This it is very difficult to answer at this juncture because it requires a lot of time. Time is the main constraint because I got other commitments of economy, geography and quantitative aptitude. So, probably after civil services preliminary examination this aspect can be thought of, but the second point, that is emphasis on S&T health and education, that will be incorporated gradually in the capsules to come. And there is one suggestion from learning space with the point that the knowledge which we are giving to you from learning space after a lot of research, whatever the research we do, but if you start this discussion forum collectively, your combined strength will be much more than that of learning space. If all of you start discussion forum after each and every editorial, at the same time after each and every capsule, that immensely benefit the student community because your combined strength is much more than the strength of any organization. So, this YouTube channel, please use it as discussion forum also, so that your knowledge will be elevated day by day. So, this is all what I would like to say, and for next 3-4 months there will not be any change in the present pattern. And another important aspect is we are starting from today English comprehension discussion, that means to improve your vocabulary. And some students raised that how it will benefit civil services students. I will answer at 12 o'clock to this question, because improved word power is very much essential to put your answer directly within the given words of 100 or 150, whatever it is. So, that I will answer at 12 o'clock. And from today onwards at 12 o'clock you will have newspaper editorial discussion. Today, first day we are discussing the editorial of a business line on 5th January, and that we are discussing today, and for tomorrow we will announce one day in advance, so that you can read that and you can note down various points that I am talking about English comprehension, right. So, let us look into the aspects. Yesterday there was one important article in the Indian Express, though it has got political overtones. I am not going into political overtones. The article is whether RBI's autonomy, where it is leading to. Nowadays RBI is under reputational risk because it is not communicating with the public, and they have got liability. When I deposited 2 lakh rupees, then they are giving 24,000, and some places money is not available in ATMs. I am not going into demonetization aspect, but several experts stated that banking system is under reputational risk, and this is very easy to follow. I am not discussing this article, you can follow very easily. It is written in simple language, and this will be useful if a question is asked like this: demonetization and subsequent developments not only eroded the autonomy of Reserve Bank of India, but also put Indian banking system under reputational risk. Critically examine. So, for answering this type of question, this article is very important, and I am not going into the political aspects because it is written by P. Chidambaram, but that article has got so many points. If you look at, if you want to answer this type of question, then the next one is, yesterday in the Sunday magazine of The Hindu, Moonstruck, there was one article with regard to the moon mission by a startup firm, that is a Team Indus. Team Indus is going to launch moon mission within a year. I think probably their launch is scheduled next January, if I am not wrong. Similarly, ISRO is coming up with its Chandrayaan 2, and they are going to launch a rover, and all those aspects we would like to present in a capsule form, because this article does not give the total picture required for the article. So, I am omitting at this juncture, and you will have one capsule on this Team Indus. Then the next article is on Saturday, The Hindu, one important article, because the Supreme Court in majority judgment stated that repetition of same ordinance is a fraud on the constitution. And what is the meaning behind it? We are going to deliberate, and I have written repeatedly governments are resorting to ordinances. As per the editorial, 3 points it mentioned. Governments are resorting to frequent ordinances because it is reluctant to face the legislature in particular issues. That is one reason. Second is, when the majority is not there in the upper house, that is Rajya Sabha, sometimes governments are resorting to this practice. Then the third one is need to overcome the impasse in legislature caused by repeated and willful disruption by a vociferous section of the opposition. Here two meanings are very important. What is the impasse? Several times we come across this word, and Parliament logjam of December is one classic example. What is meant by impasse? Impasse means progress is impossible when people involved cannot agree. So, this situation we faced in Parliament. So, this word you come across several times. Impasse means that is the situation when progress is impossible, when people involved cannot agree deliberately. So, government is this side, opposition is this side. So, it created impasse. That is the main reason of Parliament washout. Then vociferous, this word, what is the meaning of vociferous? Vociferous means people express their demands loudly and repeatedly, going to the well of the house, we have seen. So, these two words are very important if you look at this article, and these three aspects mentioned in the editorial, these three are the main reasons for a repeated promulgation of ordinances. Let us go back. Ordinance power comes from article 123(1). If you look at the central government, if you look at the state governments, 2131 is the article. So, these articles are important. As per article 123(1), when the Parliament is not in session, when the President is satisfied that there is a necessity for enacting a law, then ordinance can be issued. But what the Supreme Court has said is, you are issuing ordinances 4 times, 5 times without going to Parliament, by circumventing the due process of, by not going to the legislature, you are just sidestepping the legislature. That is why it is a fraud on the constitution. So, these articles, please do not forget, 123(1) and 2131. 2131 particularly pertains to states, and this article, this ordinance issuing power is misutilized, that is in the words of Supreme Court. That is why it stated it is a fraud on the constitution. As per our constitution, it is a 3 independent organs: judiciary, executive, legislature. Judiciary, executive, judiciary is headed by the Supreme Court, and executive, Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. Legislature, legislature is nothing but parliament, that is elected members, that means both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So, these 3 organs are independent as per the constitution. When the organs are not functioning independently, then Supreme Court will come into picture, because it is a guardian of the constitution. And one important power with the Supreme Court is it can undertake judicial review when the laws passed by the parliament are not in tune with the constitution. Then Supreme Court can enter, and at the same time, if the law of the land is violated by the executive, then also Supreme Court can enter. So, Supreme Court is the guardian of the constitution, and what I mean to convey is these 3 organs are totally independent. With regard to the ordinance issuing power, one time it is all right, because it is specifically mentioned once the parliament is convened, it should be ratified within 6 weeks as per the constitution. And what is the point in issuing second time, third time? And this issue came to the forefront in 1986 also in DC Vadhva case. Repeated promulgation is unconstitutional. And now the Supreme Court in Krishna Kumar Singh versus State of Bihar, it stated that it is a fraud on the constitution, and judicial review can be done if it is with oblique purpose. It is not straight with some ulterior motive. If the ordinance is issued, then judicial review can be done. As I have already told you, judicial review is by the as per the constitution, because judicial review can be undertaken when the structure is violated, when the basic structure is violated, then judicial review can always be done. That what I mean to convey is when parliament passes the laws inconsistent with constitution, and when executive is not obeying the laws of the land, then judicial review is the ultimate thing in the constitution, right. So, it is with oblique purpose, then judicial review can be done. Right. Let us look at the next 2 words used in this article. Governments are resorting to obstinacy, and opposition is obstructionism. It blamed both the government as well as opposition. Government is resorting to obstinacy. What is the meaning of obstinacy? Determined to act in a particular way, not changing at all. That means government is stubborn. That is the essence of the article. Why number of times ordinances are being issued? Because government is stubborn, and opposition is equally to be blamed for obstructionism. Opposition is obstructing the functioning of parliament. So, because of these 2 reasons, these ordinances are being issued. Then, if you look at the most important aspect is executive should not usurp the functions of legislative. In our parliamentary system, there is every possibility, because the Prime Minister is supreme as far as executive is concerned. Prime Minister not only on the government, he will have full control over the party also. So, there is every possibility that executive will ride over the legislature. Executive will ride over the legislature, so as to avoid that. So, as to allow legislature to work independently, constitution has given several safeguards. And here 91st amendment to the Constitution of India is one important aspect. I am just extending this discussion. This is a fraud on the constitution, that is one aspect. I am just extending, because several times questions may be asked that how do you view that the relation of this executive as well as legislature. Sometimes there is a suspicion that executive is overriding the legislative process. And what are the safeguards in the constitution? The first one is 91st amendment to the Constitution of India. This was brought in 2004. As per 91st Amendment, Article 75(1)(a) was installed. Article 75(1)(a) says in the government, that is total number of ministers including the Prime Minister in the Council of Ministers shall not exceed 15% of total members of the House of People or Lok Sabha. So, total ministers should be restricted to 15% of total members of Lok Sabha. Why this was introduced and why this was passed? This was passed because of the reason executive should not have excessive influence on the legislative organ. If out of the total members of Lok Sabha, 200 members are made ministers, 250 members are made ministers, then what will happen? Then most of them will become executive and legislative power will be subverted. That means the legislative cannot work independently. So, keeping that in mind, this 91st constitutional amendment was brought, restricting 15% is the limit up to which members can become ministers. So, the ministers can be from either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, that is different story, but the total strength cannot exceed 15% of the total number of members of the House of People. So, this safeguard was kept. The second one is office of profit. This is another safeguard. That means government or executive can give several posts to legislative members or Lok Sabha members. Then subsequently, it will have influence over Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, so as to preempt this. Other than ministers, it is clearly mentioned that the members of legislative organs should not hold office of profit. This is one important safeguard, and this is as per 102(1)(a). This is a member shall be disqualified being a member of either House of Parliament if he holds any office of profit. So, he cannot hold any office of profit, and it is the constitution is silent about what is office of profit, but Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act contains what are list of such bodies. Right. So, this office of profit is also incorporated so as to eliminate the control of executive over the legislative organs. Right. So, similarly for states, similar article exists, that is 191(1)(a). These things, please do not forget. Why I am discussing all these things is, in addition to the fraud on the constitution, if you look at ordinance, that means first is ordinance making power, means it is taking away the legitimate functions of legislature, and to safeguard legislatures, what are the other remedies available in the constitution? I am talking about that. The first one, as I have already told you, 91st Amendment, and their 15% is restricted, that membership ministers. Second one is this office of profit. So, these things are very important. And third one is judicial review. As I have already told you, when legislative laws are contravening the laws, or you can say contravening the constitutional articles, then judicial review is possible. When the executive is not following the laws of the land, then judiciary can intervene, because the supreme authority as far as constitution is concerned is the judiciary. To interpreting the constitution, judiciary is the final authority. Then these three are one side, but the whip issued by the parties, this is in fact eroding the independence of legislators. Because of the reason, the BJP, let us take for example, it has got 282 members or so, and when BJP issues a whip to vote for particular bill, then members cannot vote against, then they will be disqualified. So, this is the anomaly, and there is a lot of debate going on, because legislators have to vote depending on their consciousness, not based on the dikkat issued by the political parties. And there is an opinion that at least some of the bills must be separated, where the parliament members or legislative assembly members should use their brain before voting, instead of following the dikkat or whip issued by the political parties. So, the first 4 what we have discussed, including this ordinance making power, are strengthening the view that executive and legislature have independent, but the whip of the political parties is somewhat violating that. Whip of the political parties indirectly giving power for the executive over the legislative organs. Right friends, we will stop this discussion here. Important question is here. Constitution of India provided enough safeguards to prevent the influence of executive over the legislature. Do you agree? This is one important question. Several times we have discussion, especially when you look at constitution, judicial review, that one several times that comes into focus, and this issue of excessive influence of executive over the legislative organs, and for that what are the constitutional safeguards, and these are the aspects we discussed, and you can easily answer this question after listening to this. Next, when banks are awash with cash, this is the article on Saturday, that is the 7th January, and here the RBI autonomy was compromised. The essence of this article, I am telling important points as per the author is, RBI's autonomy was compromised and it became another government department. Then the demonetization opened a black market for currency notes. We discussed through capsules several times as far as the demonetization is concerned. Now let us look at it, the government's intention and how it is wrong. These 2 points are emanating from this. After reading this article, it all talks about only these 2 points. Top I have written, large volumes of deposits, because lot of deposits came to the banking system after demonetization. Large volume of deposits can spur lending and investment is the government's intention. Government's intention is because of these deposits, there will be credit growth and investment, lending, this will increase. That is the government's intention. But the author says it may be wrong. Why it is wrong? Why it may be wrong? It is going to be wrong. Why? The first one is no demand for credit in the banking system. In fact, during the past 1 or 2 years, no demand for credit. Credit growth is not satisfactory. Second point is banks are weighed down by non-performing assets. At the same time, there are stressed sectors like infrastructure, steel, power. Some sectors are stressed. That means they are already suffering because their balance sheets are not up to the mark. Then at present, GDP is primarily driven by private consumption and public investment. And now at present, poor investor sentiment is there and high gross non-performing assets are added to the problem. Because of all these reasons, when more deposits are there in the banking system because of demonetization, it may not automatically result in investments and credit growth. So that is the essence of this article, right? Let us move on. Here one question you can expect, do you think demonetization can spur investments and growth in the long run? Demonetization can spur investments and growth in the long run. Of course, there are several reasons it may not directly take place, to be very frank, because it all depends on several other aspects, as other rightly pointed out. And in addition to those points, you can also list out some other factors, and if such type of question is asked, you can write answer in this way. Then the slowing economy. Here today's editorial talks about slowing economy because the Central Statistics Office, and here 2-3 important points before going ahead. One important aspect is this Central Statistics Office. This is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation that releases GDP figures, consumer price index, as well as index of industrial production. These things are very important. If you look at any examination, Central Statistics Office under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation releases these 3, and Office of the Economic Advisor, that is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So, this releases wholesale price index and core industries growth. These two things please do not forget. So, these two are released by Office of the Economic Advisor, and here we are talking about the GDP. People talk about GDP, I am not going into how to calculate and all, but primarily GDP is based on 4 factors of any country. One is the consumption. People are demanding more and more goods because we have around 127, 128 crore population. Because of more population in a country like India, this consumption is in fact most important factor. Our growth is primarily at present for the past 1 or 2 years, our growth is due to consumption. Why consumption is not affected? Because of a huge population, and that too huge young population, that is the one reason. And second thing is government investments up to some extent, you cannot say straight away 100%, but government investments up to some extent are propelling growth. Then private investment is not up to the mark. Private sector investment is not up to the mark, and exports are also not faring well. So, our GDP growth of around 7% or so is primarily due to consumption as well as government investments, right. And there is a case, and in most of the newspapers you hear about, there is a case for giving fiscal stimulus to propel growth through government investments. Private investments are not expected to take off because of the reason several private sector organizations are suffering because of their high leverage. If you want the meaning of leverage, please listen 12 o'clock English comprehension. So, this private investment is not expected to take off in the near future, and net exports, that means exports are also not faring well, right. Having heard this, as per the report, GDP is expected to come down from 7.6 last year to 7.1, and GVA, here sometimes a question will be asked, what do you understand by gross value added? GDP is nothing but gross value added plus indirect taxes, and you have to subtract subsidies. You have to add indirect taxes and subtract subsidies. So, gross value added is real indicator of the economic activity in the country, because it does not take into account indirect taxes, at the same time subsidies. And sometimes if you consider indirect taxes as well as subsidies, then the real picture may not be visible. That is why to have the real picture evident, one has to look at gross value added. So, gross value added means the value addition in the country in goods and services, and it does not consider indirect taxes as well as subsidies, and if these are all included, then it is GDP. GDP is used for comparison purpose, but this indirect taxes, subsidies effect, if it is not there, then how the real value added, that is gross value added, right. And here important points from this editorial: GDP slowdown is imminent. GDP slowdown this year is imminent because this report is for 7 months of the period. The 7 months is from April to October, and all of you are familiar with November 8 demonetization. So, because of demonetization from November, it is further expected to slow down. So, up to October the slowdown is clearly evident, but after November, if you analyze the subsequent after effects of demonetization, growth will further come down. The worrying factor and good factors, there are two factors here. The one is worrying factor. The worrying factor is manufacturing and services are losing momentum. So, this is the worrying factor. Then agriculture is faring well, one good sign. Then Rabi sown area increased by 6.5%. So, good days for agriculture this year. So, this year agriculture is going to do better, but the worrying factor is manufacturing and services are losing momentum. So, what the editorial suggests? Fiscal stimulus is required in the budget, fiscal stimulus, and it is a case for increasing government expenditure. Increasing government expenditure, there is a case. So, that what this article concludes. Look at the next one, unclogging the cities. I am not going to deliberate much on this. Unclogging the cities, it is talking about certain landmarks across the world or having exclusive pedestrian tracks, cycle tracks, because this is written because recently government took a decision with regard to Connaught Place. Connaught Place will be made with exclusive pedestrian zones, and subsequent to that news item, this editorial appeared. So, the editorial says that globally there are certain landmarks which are pedestrialized. That means pedestrians are only allowed, like Times Square in New York. In New York Times Square, only pedestrians are allowed, and along Seine River in Paris, Paris in France, along Seine River, only pedestrians are allowed, and in some places pedestrians and cycle tracks are allowed, and powered vehicles are normally kept out of core areas. So, cycle tracks, pedestrian walkways, these are very important, and the article suggests that they should be amalgamated into smart cities concept. We learnt a lot about smart cities. So, the article suggests that integrate this into the smart cities concept, like walking tracks, bicycle tracks, emission free public transport infrastructure. Do not allow cars, but public transport will be allowed with emission free. So, these are the aspects to be integrated into smart cities, because government is developing 100 smart cities. So, the intention of the newspaper is please integrate them into smart cities. Look at the last one, green bonds. What is meant by green bonds? Today that Pravasi Bharatiya Divas one article is there, I have not gone through it. If any substance is there, I will tell you tomorrow, and this article is the last article for today, and this is about green bonds. Green bonds means, before understanding green bonds, please understand what is the difference between share and bond. Shares means, if you are subscribing to shares, you will assume ownership, you will become part owner in the company. So, debt instruments means, because when you are subscribing to some bonds, you are purchasing debt instrument. So, debt instrument means you are giving money, that means it is borrowing money. You are giving money, so there will be the relation is borrower lender. Borrower lender instrument is debt instrument. Then equity instrument talks about shares and ownership. So, equity instrument, shares, dividends, if company is in profits, dividends are issued. But a debt instrument will have specified interest, sometimes that is known as coupon rate also, and this article is about green bonds. What is the meaning of green bond? Green bond means when companies are issuing bonds for specified green projects, they are known as green bonds. Suppose some renewable energy project like wind energy project or some solar energy project has to come up, and a company is issuing green bonds basically to support green initiatives. That is the concept of green bonds, and here capital is raised to fund green projects, and here in the year 2015 February, first green infrastructure bond is issued by S Bank. Similarly, Exim Bank issued 5-year 500 million green bond in March 2015, and green masala bond was issued by IFC. What is IFC? IFC is the wing of World Bank, please do not forget. So, it is organ of World Bank, and which looks at raising capital, because capital is required for the growth of the countries. It is with a view this IFC is established. So, various organs of World Bank should have clear knowledge. What is Exim Bank? Exim Bank looks at our exports and imports, financial needs of exports and imports, and S Bank, all of you are familiar with S Bank. So, they issued this green bonds, and green bonds basically here the interest rate is less here, and the bank when it borrows, the risk is taken by the bank. Bank is borrowing money and at the same time that is financing some infrastructure project. So, the risk is taken by the bank. So, the investor is safe. If I am subscribing to green bond, then I am safe because some bank is acting as a guarantee in between, and green bonds is going to become the future. And the author stated in recent times the issue of green bonds increased enormously or exponentially. And what about regulation? Here Securities and Exchange Board of India stated which classify as green bonds: renewable energy like wind and solar, clean transportation, sustainable water management, climate change adaptation, like that. It has bifurcated into 7. So, this is all about green bonds, and as more and more information comes in news articles, or maybe after some time we will have one news capsule on green bonds, its positives and negatives. Incorporating all those things, we will have one news capsule shortly. So, with this today's editorials discussion, let us conclude. Please do join for tomorrow's editorial discussion at 11 a.m. and please do not forget 12 o'clock you will be joining with me for the English comprehension, because several students face difficulty in understanding various English words, right. So, please do join at 12 noon. So, with this concludes this editorial discussion, right. Have a nice day. Thank you. Thanks a lot.